Greetings, everyone. Eid Mubarak and all the blessings that come with it to you and yours wherever you are. Welcome to this webinar on coronavirus and the Trinidad and Tobago Carnival, the impact and opportunities to rebound after the crisis. My name is Joseph. I'm the program coordinator of the Academy of Arts, Letters, Culture, and Public Affairs at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. Here at the Academy, we are home to a Master of Arts program in Carnival Studies, which we believe has an important role to play in the growth and development of Carnival for carnivalists in every sphere. Be they creators, educators, researchers, enthusiasts, administrators, policymakers, or entrepreneurs. With this in mind, it is certainly a pleasure to have our Carnival Studies alum and current doctoral candidate Lamar Pollard lead this conversation. Lamar is a festival and event professional with over 15 years in the carnival industry. His ongoing doctoral research focuses on the relationship between carnival policy implementation and the governance network for the Trinidad and Tobago Carnival. He currently works at UTT with the Academy for the Performing Arts as production manager and also lectures on event management related courses. On behalf of our program professor, Hollis Liverpool, students, alums, and staff of the Academy of Arts, Letters, Culture, and Public Affairs, and the university's postgraduate community, it is my privilege to hand you over to our moderator for proceedings, Mr. Lamar Pollard.
Thanks so much, Chrison, and welcome all viewers. As Chrison shared, my name is Lamar Pollard, and I will be your moderator today. Just a bit of housekeeping before we start. There will be a brief Q&A segment at the end of the formal presentations, and you should submit your comments or questions under the link on the University of Trinidad and Tobago's Facebook page, or you can email them to the academy at utt.edu.tt. Please be mindful that we will only be fielding questions relevant to the discussion. 1 second. Okay, so please allow me to introduce the members of this esteemed panel. We have Marcus Ash. Marcus has been involved in the steel pan community for the past 18 years, He's been with the Silver Star Steel Orchestra since 2006 and currently functions as their drill master. He was also a member of the National Symphony Steel Orchestra for 10 years. He held the position of Secretary of the Eastern Region of Pantrinbago for 3 years before being elected as Education Officer of the organization, which is the position he currently holds. Next, we have Devon Seale, who's been practicing Calypso for over 30 years. He holds a BSc in Computer Science and an MBA in International Finance. Devon was the 2016 Calypso Monarch and currently functions as the Assistant Public Relations Officer of TUCO, the Trinidad Unified Calypsonians Organization. Next on the panel, we have Lionel Jagessar Jr., who's a third-generation mask maker, designer, and performer of traditional masks. Lionel has been competing and designing costumes for the National King of the Bands competition for the past 15 years. He is the CEO of Jagessar Costumes, and he represents the Trinidad and Tobago Carnival Bands Association on the NCC Operations Committee. Up next, we have Simon Baptiste. He's the founder and co-founder and CEO of Question Mark Entertainment. Over the years, Simon has managed and guided the careers of a slew of major soca artists, particularly Kes the Band, MX Prime, and Nadia Batson. He has also guided the career of Ricky Jai. Simon has also led several major independent projects and has collaborated with Will Smith and Snoop Dogg, among others. Most recently, Simon was appointed Creative Director of the International Soca Monarch and is currently working on the 7th installment of the widely popular Decibel series. The next gentleman needs very little introduction. This is Jules Sobion, more popularly known as Julius, and he's been involved in the entertainment industry since 2006. He's the founder, the general, the CEO, and the commander-in-chief of Caesar's Army Limited, one of the country's leading events companies. Skilled tactician, Jules has been at the helm of Caesar's Army for the past 15 years. He recently formed a company, ZA, Talent Management and Brand Development Organization. So that's one of his more recent projects. Up next, we have Ryan Darcy, who started off his career in tourism at TTCO, the Tourism and Industrial Development Company of Trinidad and Tobago, in 1999, where he worked for 5 years before going across into the marketing industry, working for marketing giant McCann Erickson, where he held the position of Group Account Director, overseeing major brands such as Heineken, etc. He served on the board of the Tourism Development Company from 2012 to 2015, and he currently holds the position of Manager of Research, Strategy, and Marketing at Tourism Trinidad Limited. And last, but certainly not least, we have Carla Parris. She's an entertainment and sports lawyer and content creator and CEO of Parris Productions Limited, which produces the YouTube series, The Business of Carnival. She operates the first boutique law practice in Trinidad and Tobago, whose focus is in the area of entertainment, intellectual property, and sports law. She has also operated as consultant for the government of Trinidad and Tobago, the OECS Commission, the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, and the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee. Welcome, panelists. Christian, can you share the first slides, please? So a few important points to note before we start. This panel does not represent all stakeholders within the carnival industry. Carnival is a multifarious festival. You would notice that we don't have a representative from Tobago Carnival, from the chutney sector. We don't have any persons representing dance, artisans, wire benders, stick fighters, etc. We also have no one representing the ancillary sectors, such as makeup, photography, transportation, etc. This webinar is meant to spark discussion and thought on the current situation in an organized fashion. And it does not preclude the organization of subsequent stakeholder discussions. In fact, the Academy of Arts, Letters, Culture, and Public Affairs intends to facilitate more discussions on the topic with a wider range of stakeholders. And I think more glaringly, the panel only has one female participant, which definitely does not represent the male-female ratio within the broader managerial and performance aspects of the festival. This was purely unintentional, and I just thought it was important to mention. The second point, as it pertains to the perspectives and opinions of the panel, you know, the Trinidad and Tobago Carnival is a tapestry of cultural threads, you know, woven together by all the people who came to Trinidad. So it makes sense that people would be passionate about the festival and its future. But to be clear, this panel will be speaking from their cultural and industry expertise. Their views are their own and are intended to provide context within that realm. And the last, and I think the most salient point to note, is that the webinar is not intended to lessen the importance of public health. Globally, there's an ongoing discussion on how nations strike a balance between the health of their citizens and lessening the economic blow of shutdowns of specific sectors of global industry. And discussions on public health and economic health should not be treated as mutually exclusive. And while we discuss the economic impact of the virus on Carnival, we remain completely cognizant that the public health and safety of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago and the wider region and world, as it, for that matter, will and should always come first. Next slide, please, Christian. Okay, so before we jump into the discussion, it's important to kind of contextualize things by looking at some of the challenges that Carnival faced before COVID-19. Please note that this list of challenges is by no means exhaustive, but these are the major challenges that my research has uncovered. The first is a scarcity of data, specifically data to facilitate econometric analysis, but also sociocultural data. Accurate, disaggregated data is critical to effective decision making. And COVID has shown us that, since the use of data and a scientific approach has been largely responsible for the successful management of the virus, locally speaking. The data most readily available at present as it pertains to Carnival is touristic data, such as visitor arrivals and expenditure. The second major challenge is the governance of the festival. To be clear, governance here refers to self-organizing networks or the collection of stakeholders involved in the policy process. So the NCC Act of 1991 officialized the government's role as the leading voice in Carnival management. But the cabinet minutes of 1997 redistributed power to the special interest groups, namely Pantrinbago, TUCO, and the National Carnival Bands Association, who was the representative body for mass at that time. This has not made collaboration impossible. On the contrary, there has been a healthy amount of collaboration across a diverse range of organizations outside of the NCC and the recognized special interest groups. The issue, however, is that the process of developing a focused policy agenda has become too diffused. This, of course, has created challenges with establishing and implementing long-term policy strategies to deal with issues such as the one captured in the last point, the issue of sustainability. The festival has relied on government subvention since the first half of the 20th century. And as early as 1987, both the government and Carnival stakeholders recognized the importance of commodification and industrialization as a path to sustainability of the festival. This view of viability and commerciality is enshrined in the NCC Act. But to be honest, the only palpable moves towards sustainability have really been demonstrated by the private sector. So the festival is still dependent on public funds. Next slide, please, Chris. So let's take a look at the current economic challenges. It goes without saying that the Trinidad economy we need to be kind of mindful of what's going on in the Trinidad economy, According to initial reports, we have already spent close to $1 billion in the fight against COVID-19. And public expenditure is expected to increase to 6 times that amount by the end of this year, or at least by the end of the fight. More distressingly, the finance minister already hinted to a shortfall of roughly $18 billion in revenue, half of which relates directly to oil revenues. And this is important because after the oil boom of the 1970s, the Carnival subvention increased significantly from around $180,000 in the late 1960s to $8.5 million by 1981. Since that time, there has been a strong relational link between energy revenues and the Carnival subvention, as the energy sector is the linchpin of the economic portfolio of the country. This has been the case in recent history since during the 4-year period from 2015 to 2018, the annual Carnival subvention dropped by 71% from just over $312 million to $90 million as a concomitant result of the decline in energy revenues between 2014 and 2016. The official figures aren't out yet for 2019 and 2020, so I can't comment on that here, but if the economic trends of the last 40 years have told us anything, it means we need to brace for impact. Lastly, if we look at regional indicators, the CDB, the Caribbean Development Bank, estimates that several countries will fall into recession this year. We have also seen the cancellation of several carnivals and other similarly styled festivals throughout the region and internationally. This has already begun to affect carnivalists and carnival entrepreneurs in Trinidad whose products move up the islands and internationally. So that was just a recap, sorry, of the current issues that we face. I'd like to invite Mr. Ash to present at this point in time. Marcus?
Hi, good morning. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we are.
Okay, thank you, Lamar, for the invitation and by extension, your team. Let me first start by bringing greetings from the president of Pantrinbago, Mrs. Beverly Ramsey Moore, and the rest of the central executive of Pantrinbago. As you know, this time, during this pandemic, we have several challenges, not only as an organization, but as a country in which we have to overcome. And I have to give credit to the steel band movement because it's trying times like these is what would have contributed to the birth and the development of the steel pan being birthed from oppression and coming forward and always developing over the years through different situations that would have happened. Even during the lockdown period where we would have been self-quarantined, you see the continued movement of the steel band movement where you would have had different ideas coming forward and happening during this time. So for example, a month ago, we would have had what was named Panogramma, which was something launched by one Nevin Roach in Tobago, where they had a panorama on Instagram. So they call it the Panogramma. This would have gotten a lot of attraction, not just from Trinidad and Tobago citizens. We had participants in it from Barbados, Jamaica, Antigua and Barbuda, Puerto Rico. We had the US. So it was given the attraction globally, despite the fact that we were all quarantined. We also have coming up, we have the Exodus Steel Orchestra is launching a competition that is no stranger to steel pan, which is the Pan Ramage. And the Pan Ramage is coming up and it will be happening by next month, I believe, where participants from all around the world again will come and showcase their talent there. We go forward with that. We also had many bands who would have put together their video collage where they came together and they played an arrangement, different songs. We had Renegade Steel Orchestra launching their series online, Beat the Pandemic, where they brought on members from their band. Each week they featured a different member to perform for an hour. That would have been well received as well. Pantrinbago would have facilitated, endorsed all these events. We started looking forward as in the social effect in the steel band community. How are our membership being affected by this pandemic? We know there is a loss of income. We know that there are a lot of hurdles, obstacles, bills coming up. So Pantrinbago has put together a committee in which I am also a member of, where we deal with the social prosperity of the membership, where on Friday we'll be launching that, where members can apply for different grants regarding maybe they may have a medical expense or some form of bill that they need to pay besides the hamper drive and thing that is going on. We'll be able to financially assist, and people can donate to that fund to assist with that. In moving forward, Pantrinbago, again, as we said, we're facilitating what is going on online, and we are also dancing to the music that the government is playing right now, meaning we have to be guided by the government and what they are recommending going forward, as they are also getting guided by the medical professionals. So until we are informed by them how we can proceed, we are dancing to their music in terms of if we have to do a downscale event, depending on how the situation go, we would go with it. So that in itself is a nutshell of where the steel band movement, by extension Pantrinbago, is at right now. That is my brief overview, and I'll be here for the question and answer. Lamar, over to you.
Thank you, Marcus. I really find it interesting, the whole series of web-based events, particularly Panorama and the Beat the Pandemic, of which there were several UTT students involved, just to plug UTT. But I think that this direction is very important. I'm hoping that as we move further in the webinar, we could discuss at least how we monetize these types of products. Because again, doing a lot of this type of online and web-based events is something that I think is somewhat new to some sectors of the industry. I would like to move to Devon, who I'm not seeing right now. So I think I will skip forward to Lionel Jagessar. Lionel? This type of online web.
Hi, morning. Are you all hear me?
Yes, Lionel, we're hearing you.
Hi, good morning to everyone, and greetings to the Muslim community, Mubarak. And I'd like to bring greetings also from my president, Mr. Gabriel. Well, I could get right into it. Some of the ways that we were affected in mass are the obvious ones that you see. We have no events where you could have like a band launch or a display in public. And time is on our side though. People are getting scared about not having carnival next year. That's the main question. For the carnivals that have been cancelled already, I wouldn't like to sound cynical and say it's easy for them to decide, because they already cancelled and they know they're waiting on next year, because it's happening inside the whole situation. For us, we are in the planning stages. So we haven't seen anybody done anything as in Pan where they went live and showed their costumes and stuff, because art is more visual. A visual, we have seen mastering. You don't really get a CD where you can listen over and over to a costume. You have to see a costume or see artwork in ways like that. So I haven't seen anybody go live with a costume yet to say we're showing our designs for next year. I've seen somebody in fashion do a show with our people. They did a 3D expose of their stuff. So I don't know if we could use that as an idea in mass. Some of the questions were being asked by smaller entities as well to me, like you mentioned wire vendors in the beginning. My father's a wire vendor, so he's in that business as well. So we do wire bras and individuals and stuff, and they all have the same anxieties. Are we going to have a job? Are we going to get, because we lost all the jobs from these smaller islands already. But my main thing is to say is that time is on our side, and we can't make a decision now about if we're having carnival next year. We could wait and see how it goes. I'd like to open up myself for questions at the end as well. So I think that's as much as I could say now.
Okay, thanks so much, Lionel. Again, I take your point of being unable to actually monetize the costumes as easily as other forms of intellectual property, such as music and other types of visuals that can be transmitted online.
Stuff, yeah.
You know, that's very interesting. And I also take the point of the anxieties and the concerns experienced by the artisans within the industry, since many of them have lost income because of the cancellation of carnivals up the islands. I think many folks may not be aware of how integrated the Trinidad and Tobago artisan entrepreneurial community is integrated into the regional and international industries. Yes. So thanks for that. Now let's move to Devon Seale. Devon, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning.
Eid Mubarak. Eid Mubarak to all. Excellent. Let's see slides, please. Yeah, so as everyone would say, this is kind of like an unprecedented time for the organization Trinidad and Tobago, TUCO. And we deal with when we look at the ecosystem. So I'm going off just on what Lamar would have started up pre-COVID because we need to establish certain facts. Yes, we know that when the music is created, we have the producers, before it comes to market, we have the producers, the artists, the musicians, the lighting, the promoters, it's the entire ecosystem, but we are specifically dealing with the artists and the musicians. Second fact is that within this community or the industry, it is a seasonal industry, specifically for the Calypsonians and the Soca artists within the boundaries of Trinidad and Tobago. 2, it is based on gigs and performances and competitions. It is not one that is driven by record sales or even royalties. So that within we can move to the next slide, sorry. The impact. Next one. Yes, so in terms of the impact, we would have had a negative impact, which would have generally been the loss of income. Creativity would have been stymied because you're actually hearing from a number of artists that were saying that, they are not going to make any music because really and truly, within Trinidad and Tobago, we have no incentives. There are no incentives to create that new music, no competitions for the artists who would travel, who would normally go out to the other carnivals because of the fact that, there's cancellation of all those different carnivals or restrictions to travel. We're not getting that new music. However, in a positive way, what we have recognized is that there's an extra interest in a lot of artists now wanting to utilize these social platforms, social media platforms, together with better their skills in terms of utilizing the technology. TUCO would have hosted about a year and a half ago, TUCO would have partnered with Roytech UE and bring to a course where there have been social media as well as marketing skills. And what has happened now is that, yes, we had a very good participation, but a lot of other artists now are inquiring more about that. So this is an opportunity now for TUCO probably to create that online training for the majority of Calypsonians. And I need to distinguish it because it's a challenge with the Calypsonians because, it's I don't want to say an older, but a more mature performers. Next slide, please. So how are we looking at the future? So definitely you will have to do a hybrid model where you will have to utilize the technology as well as the old traditional way of how we operate as business. This might be a new opportunity for tent owners as well because, we would have had shows of extending over 3 to 4 hours. Now with respect to creating that content, and I even saw that recently, well not recently, but since March, WAC 90.1, they have become involved. Actually, they are now a virtual event management association where they are hosting a lot of these online virtual shows weekly. Legislation, and why I raise the point of legislation is that because of the fact that within our boundaries here in Trinidad and Tobago, as I said, we are not driven by record sales and royalties, predominantly record sales and royalties. This is probably an opportunity for us because for I think it's over 50 years, TUCO, we have been championing, lobbying for at least 50% airplay for the artists. 50% airplay. I'm not sure if it's because of the you see that ganja, they got their way. So I don't know if they're trying to say that, it's the ganja that brings the music, but we definitely need to continue that lobbying for that 50% airplay. And in terms of collaboration now, you know, it will be more like leveraging on that digital technology with a lot of these, a lot of promoters, and see how we could really monetize. Because what happened is that we would have had a number of artists who would have had shows scheduled for later in the year. And what they had to do now is they had to actually cancel. Some might have canceled and some would have gone into making it virtual. But because with the virtual, what has happened is that I've spoken to a couple of them, and what they said is that, you know, because they're doing it, they're trying it out, they started it off as donate, fund me. What has happened is that the culture we have here is not that one of funding or donating. So it's a major challenge in them actually monetizing. In fact, one of the artists told me, she said, Devon, I had over 300, 400 persons viewing. And you would be surprised to know that 90% of the contributions came in from external. And she said the locals would have said, you know, the show was good, it was an hour, but you know, I find it could have been extra. And the same person was a local who would not have contributed. So in terms of that, I think we need legislation. I mean, championing the cause, and now we have an opportunity as well to utilize these performance spaces that are not being utilized now because of the social distancing and more collaboration. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Devon. I'm really interested in the idea of legislation. I think it's very important. As we have seen, the carnival has been shaped by legislation. Again, just happening back to both the NCC Act and the Cabinet Minute of 1997. Both pieces of, the NCC Act legislation and the Cabinet Note
for 1997.
Of 1997 kind of set in motion certain events that definitely informed the trajectory that the festival took as it pertains to the development or the interest in certain art forms or the promulgation of certain art forms over others, and also the managerial direction. I also like the idea of, before I go on to hybridization, as it pertains to legislation, that was a very important point you made about the legalization or decriminalization rather of marijuana and the calls that have been made for 50%, a minimum of 50% local, you know, which started since the late 90s and you know, throughout the 21st century. And yet still there, you know, I don't think we have moved any closer towards accomplishing that goal, which if it were in place, would have been a definite help at this point in time where we need to really monetize and capitalize on the intellectual property of, you know, writers, composers, etc. I think you also mentioned a good point about hybridization and looking at digital and other platforms. Again, one of the challenges I fear is that there will be the digital divide. There's going to be a gap or a lethargy for some of the practitioners of the carnival arts to move on to digital and online platforms.
As because not much are convinced that is an acceptable alternative. Huh?
Exactly. Well, we'll explore that a bit further at the end of the formal presentations. I want to invite Mr. Simon Baptiste now to shed some light or share some information rather within his area.
Hi, good morning. Let me start by wishing everyone Eid Mubarak. Lamar and your team at UTT, thank you for having me on board this webinar today. And of course, to my fellow panelists, I'm honored to share this digital stage with all of you. I guess I wear two hats today. One as a manager and booking agent who has worked in the creative sector and rep talent. And secondly, as a promoter who has staged multiple events in Trinidad and Tobago and regionally over the last 20 years. Therefore, expect me to bounce back and forth between both career fields, I guess. As pertains to our carnival sector, we were very fortunate, and maybe there's some truth to the fact that people say God is a Trinity. Unlike most countries around the globe, Trinidad and Tobago was spared the impact of coronavirus earlier this year. And according to the CSO, and obviously, Lamar, you could correct me on this, they say Carnival visitors spent on average $12,000 per person and a total spend of close to 400 million TT. Carnival also registered an increase in visitors in 2019 with 35,560 visitors counted in the 19 days prior to Carnival Monday, which is supposed to be a 5% increase over the corresponding year. Since the beginning of March, nearly every major event on the Carnival calendar has been canceled, and the list reads, pretty much from A to Z, Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, Bahamas, Bermuda. I mean, you go down the line, Cayman Islands, Guyana, Jamaica, just nearly every carnival has been affected, and there are over 30 of them. Not to mention the so-called power players in Carnival itself, Carabana in Toronto, Notting Hill in London, and Labor Day in New York, although I don't know if there was an official yet for Labor Day. The last three alone combined for over 600 million US worth of revenue. So the revenue in billions loss is substantial and a huge blow to the creative and tourism sector of these economies. What is usually missing from the public's point of view are those affected. The ones in the spotlight are always those that the larger community gravitates to. And here I refer to the talent that takes our stage, but the domino effect of COVID-19 and how it's affected musicians, those involved in trade or craft, technicians, and many other industry stakeholders in areas from scaffolding to catering to merch. Currently, there are over 1,000 creators in music, film, fashion, dance, and the arts that are suffering a critical loss in income, not to mention those in beauty, hairstylists, barbers, nail techs, etc. The reality is that artists face a number of lean years following the shutdown of this 27 billion global live music industry. The streaming revolution has been a boon for music discovery and promotion, but the real money remains in live performance. A typical worldwide artist gets 65 to 75% of the income from live performances, but by comparison, an artist out of the Caribbean, and more importantly, Trinidad and Tobago in this reference, probably gets closer to 95% from live performances. The truth is, it will take ages for consumer confidence to recover and return in mass numbers to live music and events. Toilets, ticketing, and cloakrooms are all cluster points. So the question obviously arises, what a club venue is going to do, and how are we going to, make any sort of economic impact if you can only do events that can have a capacity of 150 to 200 people, understanding, the idea of social distancing. So yes, the challenges are obvious. If we still have not managed to find a cure, regardless of our efforts to flatten the curve, comprehending opening our borders becomes very tricky. Science already dictates that large events and gatherings are not something that any government should condone, and the reasons are obvious based on what has transpired in countries recently like South Korea. I do believe, however, and history has demonstrated this, that sadly we sometimes put pocket before purpose, and that may be the result of confidence and complacency. So I wouldn't be particularly surprised if we somehow find a way to have a carnival of some scale here in Trinidad next year. My belief is that the industry will have to innovate and adapt, but in the process, we will not be able to do so unless we get some form of help. Governments in other countries, Australia, Canada, the US, and other nations have created incentivized programs to help them get through this crisis, which means that we may need to start figuring out ways, whatever it is, via crowdsourcing or other methods of helping those affected and in need. The opportunities to rebound are not necessarily limited to us having to wait until the crisis is over. Promoters in parts of Europe and the US are discovering ways of earning income by staging drive-in concerts and social distancing events. Artists are turning to streaming and other online platforms to win over audiences, market themselves, and capitalize on the sale of the singles, to, of course, capitalizing on merch on their platforms. But obviously we're not in that lane, the lane of the the artists who have top 40 Billboard hits, and we still have a long way to go. But I do believe the rebound can be swifted and anticipated once there's a cure, vaccine, or treatment made available to the market. You'll see that obviously within tourism, merchandising, textiles, vendors and suppliers, supplying light, sound, tent, scaffolding, and of course all the other industry partners and carnival participants, as mentioned, from pan to wire benders, can all see some success. However, it will not be immediate, and that's the reality of what we need to understand and face, because we're entering a period that no one has really experienced before. And I think that there has to be a level of faith and hope, but also willingness to come together and unite in order to get through this crisis and be able to, as they use that very popular word these days, to innovate as a means of simply defeating COVID. But at the same time, understanding that lives matter, and we're going to have to, well, I guess the greater part of this equation is, if science, suggests to us or dictates to us that we cannot, do anything moving forward, then we're going to have to abide by the laws of science. But I'm hopeful, and I pray that we continue to be blessed, and something gives within the short term. There you go.
Okay, thanks so much, Simon. That was a really packed presentation. I just want to pull a few nuggets from what you shared.
Sure.
I think one of the important points is that the difference between the value of the live industry to Caribbean and particularly Trinidadian artists is much different than the reality for probably American and European artists. Where you mentioned 95% of live performance in Trinidad and Tobago, or 95% of the income of performers comes from live performance, as opposed to 65 to 75 for their counterparts in the international community. I think that paints a very grim picture for the industry moving forward. And another salient point that you shared is the one of innovation and collaboration. From my experience and my own research, the innovation tends to happen much quicker and is much more prevalent in the private sector. So we have seen the private sector mass industry explode in the 21st century, after the emergence of bands like, Hearts and Poison, Barbarossa, etc. And in the 21st century, Tribe and the like have kind of taken over and redefined or renegotiated their place on the carnival landscape, particularly as economic powerhouses. And I fear that we need to be mindful that some of the other the other sectors of carnival may be a bit more lethargic as it pertains to moving towards innovation, particularly any type of digital innovation, and looking at policy-related innovations for intellectual property, etc. I also appreciate your comments on collaboration. I think that's the heart and soul of carnival, collaboration between various groups, and between the private sector, public sector, and the third sector, the NGOs, groups such as REACT, etc. Also, I think by the end of this discussion, I hope that we could at least come to some type of consensus or put forward a proposal for further discussions as it pertains to government involvement in the sector. So thanks, Simon. I'd like to move on to Mr. Julius Caesar Sobion. Jules?
Eid Mubarak to my Muslim brothers and sisters, and greetings to everyone. My presentation is based on the impact of the coronavirus on the carnival event sector, as well as the carnival mass band sector, of which I am both a part of. My company, Caesar's Army, is an experiential events and entertainment company that produces a number of experiences, which could be further defined as events and festivals for the TNT Carnival season as well as internationally. And my mass band, Rogue, which is a collaboration between Caesar's Army and Tribe, has just completed its third year of providing mass and international clientele, also for the TNT Carnival season. So for me, it's very clear to see how the coronavirus pandemic has impacted both of these sectors, especially seeing how heavily immersed they are into the carnival and entertainment industry. But again, before I continue, it should be noted that this carnival industry is actually an entire ecosystem that not only comprises event practitioners and mass bands, but is actually a multifaceted and expansive ecosystem, which also comprises a number of other professions and services, artists, DJs, food and beverage suppliers, infrastructure suppliers, carnival designers, craftsmen, decorators, etc., right? That are all dependent on and embedded within this particular industry. But if I were to use myself as an example, some of the struggles that are currently being faced within the event and the mass band sector can be defined as one, complete loss of revenue. All events that require the gathering of more than 5 persons have been canceled indefinitely. This means a complete halt of all economic activity with no potential restart date that can truly be defined. Also, as was mentioned earlier, carnival cancellations throughout the year would have also impacted revenue for those who practice any form of the event or even part and parcel of the carnival. Having these cancellations throughout the year would have impacted revenue on a yearly basis. So for 2020, for example. 2, I know even planning for these events and mass has also been hindered. There's no potential restart date. So even for the mass bands, for example, we would have traditionally launched in July, August. So that is no longer a reality. And even in respect to the actual carnival in 2021, that is not set in stone either. So it's kind of like you could try to plan as best as you can, but the future is still so uncertain. Mass bands may also have issues in terms of the importation of certain items based on the global shutdown and the closing of borders. So items that were usually ordered from abroad will also pose as an issue now because of the crisis. There's also the issue of certain fixed costs that still remain for certain business owners during these uncertain times. For example, some of us may have full-time staff and office rentals, for example, that still need to be paid on a monthly basis, even with this halt of economic activity. So it becomes a very difficult balancing act, no income versus fixed expenses. So how long can one hold on to its staff or even go the distance given the ongoing severity and impact of the crisis? And also, let's say everything was better from tomorrow. For us to restart business, there's the struggle of defining what needs to be put in place now for events and mass. The new policies and the guidelines based on the after effects of this pandemic. So take, for example, what are the new measures to be put into place for social distancing and for large gatherings given this new world of tomorrow? Also, are people even able to attend large gatherings based on the new economic situation post-COVID? Are people even comfortable to attend large gatherings post-COVID? These are some of the issues and struggles that we will face within this particular sector. And last but not least, don't forget this industry is comprised of an extensive ecosystem, which means everyone is affected. So there's an extreme need to find solutions that can resuscitate this entire industry, or we can be facing a major collapse from its stakeholders. But even with these issues and struggles, I am quite optimistic. I have to be pragmatic as a leader, especially given the global effect that this pandemic has created. But the entrepreneurial spirit within me still believes that this is the time for transformation. This is a time for all of our stakeholders to strategize and to creatively find new ways to adapt and to make your mark in the new world of tomorrow. I do believe that the government plays a very pivotal role in this, especially in how we move forward as a country. Take, for example, the Road to Recovery team that was created. I think that was exceptional, a great step in terms of making progress happen. But it's extremely important for them to acknowledge and understand how viable and how important this industry and its ecosystem is to our future. The numbers are there, the facts are there, even if there's a scarcity of the statistical data. But now is the time to strengthen and to elevate the industry and to include its stakeholders in its transformation plan. Our culture and the exportation of it to the entire world has been and will continue to be an integral form of revenue and global recognition for TNT. But the government and its respective cultural entities need to understand this and need to be fully on board with this together if we really are truly to make this a reality. For me personally, in terms of looking to the future, and in particular to the events and the mass, there are just a few things that I've started to initiate just based on strategizing our way forward. We all need to adapt. So for me, one way of adapting is I know Caesar's Army was based on the business of curating live experiences or live events. So now I have my team looking at ways that we can venture into unique ways of creating new virtual experiences. This can be in the form of live content on our social media channels, or even, let's say, Caesar's Army TV, where we can get corporate sponsors involved in virtual programming that can be accessed by a large global community. I mean, the new virtual world is there, and I would just draw reference to a clash with our Jamaican friends and our counterparts, our neighbors, Beanie Man versus Bounty Killer. They had a clash, I think it was yesterday, Saturday maybe, and 500,000 people viewed that clash. So in terms of the Caribbean making its mark, you can see the global impact and the global awareness from what we do and what we put forth as our Caribbean culture. We can also look into new forms of post-COVID live experiences, and I would always use the example of reinventing the drive-in movie concept, reinventing our very own K-Donna, for example, where you can still have a live event with the necessary infrastructural elements, but with social distancing measures, etc., being set into place. And in the case of large gatherings becoming a reality again, we also need to think of how the post-COVID carnival or large gathering will look like now. What are the things that need to be put in place to ensure that one is socially responsible, and as well the processes that will become necessary for patrons to be reassured that it's safe to be out in the public again. Carnival 2021, I mean, being a reality, are we ready to embrace just the local community for Carnival? Or even maybe the Caribbean region as our visitors based on the reopening of borders? I actually think this would be great, because I'm all in for supporting 100% Trinidad and Tobago and also being Caribbean proud. But we all still need to prepare and be ready for what can be and for what will be. Who knows? If we prepare ourselves for this and our international visitors will not be able to attend in 2021, it may cause an even greater demand for our cultural products or a resurgence for our Mecca of Carnival in later years. Just because we remain resilient and we try to find ways to adapt. So I think there are ways that we can look at where we can keep our products strong domestically, or even with an influx of our Caribbean counterparts. And last but not least, our local designers, artisans, suppliers. for the mass? Can we get our local artisans, craftsmen, and suppliers to meet this challenge, since the importation of items will be difficult? Can this reintroduce a totally local carnival free from China and US suppliers? This is also very exciting for me, because I believe this is what Trinidad and Tobago needs, strengthening us and our people to be the be-all and end-all of Carnival in its entirety. But again, we will all need everyone on the same page if we need to make this truly a reality. So yes, these are some of the ways that I think I will be focusing on as I look toward the future, and I believe that this actual thinking should be encouraged to all stakeholders of the industry. Let us be resilient, let us be strategic, let us find new ways to adapt, and let us be prepared for the revolution of this industry in this new world of tomorrow. We have to accept change. This is a time of metamorphosis for the entire industry and all of its stakeholders. Let us all come together and use this pandemic as a proverbial cocoon in which we will transform from our old way of life and emerge into something new and beautiful for the entire world to see. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Jules. Thank you so much for a very comprehensive and very informationally packed and passionate presentation. You know, one of the takeaways that I really was pleased to hear was the whole concept of ecosystem and the way in which the entanglements between the various strata of the various industrial sectors rather, and how they contribute to the festival and how they are impacted by the festival. I also take the point of experiences. Again, I will go back to the fact that the private sector again has this has been their you know, their tagline, that they are selling experiences, not costumes. And I think it may be easier for the private sector to make this transition to a hybrid or a blended carnival, as it will, and to really achieve the transformation of which you've spoken about. I don't want to count the traditional sectors of carnival out, pan, mass, calypso, traditional mass, etc. We don't want to count these folks out. But again, historically, they have benefited, or they have relied on rather, you know, a subvention and assistance from the government for at least for direction in the festival, not creative direction, but the platforms. The government kind of, as the NCC rather, as the arbiter of carnival, has kind of again managed the platforms on which the many performers would participate in the festival in collaboration with the special interest groups. And I think, as you rightfully said, there's an opportunity for the manufacturing sector, particularly the manufacturing sector in mass, to benefit from some of the limitations kind of imposed on the world as it pertains to importation, etc. This is an opportunity for us to really look at using eco-friendly materials, sustainable materials, employing a wider range of artisans. There's also an opportunity for education here for us to start to look at transfer of skills and knowledge, etc. You know, and just going back to the point of ecosystem, I think that again, you know, the NCC Act and the view of carnival, at least from the public sector perspective, has been one of dichotomy, looking at the heritage of carnival and the industry, carnival industry. And I think that we need to see them as a kind of interwoven pair of phenomena. And we need to, this is really going to play an important part in how the carnival moves forward, because again, the whole idea of transformation should not be one that it leaves certain manifestations of the carnival behind. So again, thanks, Jules. Let's move now to our colleague in the tourism sector, Mr. Ryan Darcy. Ryan.
Good morning, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can, Ryan. Morning.
Great, and I see Chris on is helping me with the PowerPoint coming right up. Eid Mubarak to all of our viewers. Thanks so much for joining us. Greetings from my CEO as well, of course, as well as the management team from Tourism Trinidad. And we have the PowerPoint up in some new colors, I see, Kirsan. How do we manage that? We can move to the next slide. Great. Wow. Yeah, this is like a whole new presentation to me. All right, guys. So just a quick recap in terms of what your tourist board is meant to be doing in terms of our key deliverables. So of course, we're in charge of sort of marketing Destination Trinidad, as well as we do look at some product development initiatives, whether that be some of the sites and attractions, as well as the visitor experience. We also have a tourism investment division, so we work closely with Invest TT on that as well. And then, of course, from our core comm side, we do manage some of the education awareness initiatives, and that's mostly to our local audience. So that's to our local TNT audience in terms of the sustainable development from an educational standpoint for Destination Trinidad. Next slide, please. So what's our core batch of USPs? Between 2016 to 2020, a roadmap would have been developed by the tourism stakeholders as well as the ministry. And coming out of that, several niches would have been shortlisted to be the sort of strategic focus for the destination. And those are what we fondly call SEC, that is sport, event, and conference tourism. So that is our core focus for Destination Trinidad, very different to Tobago and even the rest of the Caribbean, because we see that as our key USP value. And of course, today's event would fall into the sort of event tourism bucket, which of course would be Carnival. Next slide, please. So guys, I have 14 slides in 5 minutes. I'm going through very quickly, but I'm taking sort of the top line information that everyone would need to know in terms of some basic info and some background. So of course, we all know the value that is TNT Carnival and where it plays and the positioning it plays globally. We're constantly in the top 3 carnivals of the world. Usually the rivals are Rio in Brazil and Mardi Gras in New Orleans. So we're constantly in that top 3. And it's our job to ensure that we maintain that sort of stature, that we remain in top 3 and that we sort of remain top of mind in the minds of our consumers. And we keep what is TNT Carnival and the concept of it alive. Even if it takes us all the way to 2022, it's our job to keep that vibe and that energy alive. So that is something we'll be focusing on, which I'll get into in a later slide. In terms of arrivals, the Caribbean region and the US would be, of course, the key markets in terms of intake for arrivals. And we do look at those regions, the Caribbean for one, so we infiltrate those areas to promote Trinidad Carnival, as well as the diasporic large cities around the globe, which are Toronto, New York, and London. So those are our strategic focuses to keep that sort of Mecca positioning alive. Next slide. So this slide breaks down sort of the arrivals and the key markets that we look at each year. And these are based on statistics all the way up to 2020. So the US is our largest arrival intake, followed by the Caribbean as a block in the orders of Guyana, Jamaica, and Barbados. And then we have a large proportion of the length of stay scenarios, about 13 days on average. So that is generally longer than most stays for, say, eco, business, and those other niches. So we see that Carnival pulls not only huge numbers, but also visitors with longer stays, which then means more spend. And that amounts to about 11,000 TT per visit. And then the third slide, we see that from exit surveys that people are, I'm sorry, third point in that slide is that we see in the exit surveys that 97% of course have a very good experience. 87% are likely to return, which means our Carnival visitors are generally repeat visitors, which is a very good sign for what we offer. Next slide, please. So in this slide, not sure what happened here, but this slide basically shows an upward trend in terms of arrivals between 2018 and 2020. So in this slide, I just one up Simon because he had the value up to 2019. Maybe it's our fault for not getting 2020 out just yet. But you see the upward trajectory that we were heading in. It was a great one. It was short-lived because COVID is going to change that in a very large way, which I'll show you in the upcoming slide. But we had an increase of 5% in 2019 from 2018, and then 6.5% in 2020 over 2019. So we were heading in the right direction. And our plan was to actually expand the carnival calendar so that we got visitors coming in January as well, going back home and then flying back in February. And we were also going to sort of ramp up the Carnival band launch season so that we would have had a press trip and influencers coming in July to promote the Carnival band launch season as a sort of separate sub-season to Carnival. So that would have widened the Carnival calendar by about 8 or 9 months. And that is something we probably have to look at again in maybe 2022 instead. Next slide, please. Sorry about the slide shift, guys, in terms of, I don't know if it's because of our broadcasting on Zoom or what have you, but the slide basically shows a sort of wider range of the arrivals between 1999 and current day. But this slide is meant to show what the global events, how they have an effect on carnival arrivals. So some of the biggest drops you'd see here are following 9/11 and following the global economic crisis in 2018. And you're going to see an even deeper dip for 2021 coming out of COVID. So this slide is sort of meant to show what global events can cause for our arrivals. Next slide, please. This one pertains to our audience in a big way because it shows that visitors spend by bucket. So the largest bucket here is entertainment, followed by accommodation and meals. It also shows that the average visitor spends about 11,000 TT per visit. That average length of stay again is 13, and the average spend per day is about 840 TT, but I'm sure a large number of our audience and our viewers fall into that entertainment bucket, and you'll see you're number one in terms of their spend, so you're very important to the tourism sector, and I hope you knew that already. Next slide, please. So in terms of the current reality, yes, we have a loyal audience. We have the diasporic connections, and these people are very loyal, and they keep coming back, even in global crises. But what we go on to see, though, is that COVID has changed everything, even for the loyalists and even for the diaspora, as we have 100% of the destinations with restrictions, with some level of restrictions, and at least 72% with borders that are closed completely. And this will go on as each jurisdiction goes through their relevant phases. Each of our relevant markets will be affected as they go through their phases, especially if there's a wave 2 and a wave 3 come fall, which is one of the predictions. So this slide is showing that even though we have the loyalty and we have the committed diaspora, COVID is changing everything, as some of the my prior colleagues would have said. Next slide, please. But we have signs of hope. So again, we're guided by the Ministry of Health in terms of policy. We are guided by the Ministry of National Security. And so we don't have a lot of leverage here, but this slide shows that in the minds of Americans and Europeans, so some of our bigger blocks of consumers, that they're already starting to think travel. So 1 in 10 are ready to travel immediately. 7 in 10 are ready to travel when the borders open and things free up a bit. And 7 in 10 is a high number. We have 6 in 10 of Americans who would attend a large festival by the end of this year. Now, again, this may not be a reality for us, but this is in the minds of the consumer, which is one of the roles we play in terms of shaping the way they think. And then 7 in 10 Americans would attend a concert. And we would have seen in a recent communication in our WhatsApp group that we're starting to change the way we do concerts and large festivals, whether it be in your car or virtually. And then what's cool to know is that the smaller hotels, guest houses, host homes, villas, those are the types of accommodations that they feel are a bit safer than your larger hotels. So this may be an opportunity for our associations like Stayot, Airbnb, which is unregulated at the moment, but those are the sorts of accommodations that they may be looking at differently, and a movement away from the large hotels, which will still fill, but the mindset is stay in smaller hotels. The Europeans as well feel similarly, but they see the window as a little bit longer in terms of when they're willing to travel. Next slide, please. So some of the projections, of course, I think we just skipped a slide in error there. Go back one slide. Great. So in terms of the borders, in a nutshell, the world may be opening up in January 2021, but is Carnival in February 2021 realistic for us? We need to see how the Ministry of Health guides us, national security. It could be that we look at a Carnival later in the year, maybe in July 2021, for instance. So we may need a few extra months to sort of see what the social distancing looks like, how the virus vaccine is coming along, that kind of thing. And then, of course, the final point is that there could be an increase in the demand, a pent-up increase in demand, because all the other Trinity-style carnivals for 2020 were cancelled or postponed. So there may be pent-up demand for somebody to sort of attend Mecca again, whether it be February, probably too soon, or July in 2021. Next slide, please. And in terms of how we've been marketing Carnival during COVID and post-COVID, of course, for the time being since March, we've been looking at that sort of inspirational, nostalgic approach, as well as educational approach. So we would have partnered with Carla, the Business of Carnival, for the YouTube series. And then our general positioning in social and digital was positioning the Carnival Mecca and sort of increasing that yearning and that desire to come as soon as we open up, or come virtually. And then, of course, what are we doing about our citizens? So our first levels, as would have been mentioned earlier, is a sort of local carnival that could be opened up to the regional market as well. And by doing that, a lot of the community-based carnivals may play a greater role from a product development standpoint. So the carnival could actually move out of the Port of Spain-centric approach into the smaller cities and communities and their carnivals, so that you have a more intimate event, so the social distancing is a little better managed. And then, of course, there's focus on the Caribbean diaspora, because they'll be opening up sooner than, say, the US market. And then we, of course, obviously moving away from that traditional media approach to the digital media approach, which, of course, would be an obvious move. Next slide, please. And this is the final slide, guys. I think I made my 5 minutes. So, of course, our focus before COVID, during COVID, and after COVID is our influencers. We've made sure that our influencers are still speaking to our markets. And then, of course, our journalists that would have come in February, we were shifting them to the sort of Carnival band launch period in July. That now is going to change again. So we're keeping the audience entertained and alive via television and digital. And then again, those partnerships that we form, we're relying on our sister government agencies, as well as you, the private sector, to bring us amazing proposals for us to look at, consider, and possibly partner. So then when we start those partnerships, we can sort of reclaim and redeem our ownership of Carnival. An example would be Carnicon, that would have been happening in November of this year. And then, of course, the virtual concerts and shows, we would have partnered with Nyla Blackman so far for a live. Looking forward to partner with other artists. We're looking at potentially Patrice for our destination videos. So we're hoping to sort of bring some business to our artists. And we do want to partner with potential future concerts. And even if they're drive-in concerts, we look forward to those proposals from the private sector and sister agencies, as well as further investment in the travel trade research. So we have a great research arm of Tourism Trinidad, and we hope to be bringing you some more detailed research. You would have seen some of the slides coming forward, that we're getting some more real-time research and results, and bringing forward those research results in terms of what it means to the globe and how it influences how we move forward with tourism overall. And then our final slide. And I'd like to thank everyone for listening, and have a great day. I'll be on standby for further questions later.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for us another very comprehensive presentation. Apologies for the technical challenges with the PowerPoint, but you know how Murphy is. I found it very interesting that you pointed out specifically the statistics on repeat visitors. Usually in the range of 87% of visitors to Trinidad, being repeat visitors, etc. I am wondering if there's an opportunity for domestic tourism and tourism between Trinidad and Tobago, some increased tourism between both islands, particularly because there is anticipated to be a serious decline in income, or at least, to put it differently, recession in several of the Caribbean countries in the region. And I don't know if we definitely can't expect American visitors or international visitors for the foreseeable future. So I don't know if this is an opportunity for us to, again, explore opportunities for domestic tourism. I also found it interesting, the whole idea of the Carnicon, and I'm eager to see how an online version of the conference can be staged. I know that the conference industry internationally generates, or at least in the States, generates close to $2 billion US dollars in revenue each year. So the conference industry is something that we should definitely consider. So thanks again. I'd now like to move across to our closer, the lovely Carla Parris. Carla, are you there?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Anytime you're ready, Carla.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Lamar and UTT, for having me in this discussion. I'm just waiting on my slides to be pulled up. I think we're still looking at Ryan's presentation. Okay. So, I have 5 minutes to discuss the carnival sector, and that's going to be a challenge. I'm generally very wordy, so I'm going to try to make this as brief as possible. But what I'm endeavoring to do is to look at the state of the carnival industry, because I know that we want to talk about what are the opportunities, where do we go from here? But I think that in order for us to determine what the opportunities are, we need to know where we are now. So in order to do that, I want to touch very briefly on the work of the Business of Carnival series, because I believe that it has unearthed some data to explain perhaps where we can go in terms of understanding intellectual property and its value to us across the carnival ecosystem. So next slide, please. Oh, I don't know why that's black. But the Business of Carnival YouTube series was launched in 2018 on YouTube. And thus far, we've had 3 seasons, which feature key entrepreneurs, celebrities, entrepreneurs across 3 countries, Trinidad, Barbados, and in the United States, specifically Los Angeles, Hollywood. Next slide, please. Next slide. So we would have had many various persons. Right here, you're seeing DJ Puppy from Barbados, Richard Haynes. We've had Jules, Dean Akin. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide, right. Anya Youngchi from Fashion. You could go back to the other slide, right. And this season, we had Nyla Blackman and Anson Sobra. Next slide, next. Next slide. I'm not sure why these slides are black. Can you move forward? I'm just waiting on him to switch the slide because it's currently black.
Hello?
Yeah?
Yeah, let me apologize. I don't know why it's loaded like this. Let me see if I can go back to your original, what was originally sent. Maybe it'll show up better. Give me just half a second. Apologies.
So in the meantime, Carla, I just want to see if we could at least engage in a brief discussion, if you're willing to share any of your thoughts on the versus battle that we had with Beanie Man and Bounty Killer the other night. Because again, I think folks are looking at those types of those types of products or the online platforms to begin monetizing performances, etc. I don't know what if you have any thoughts on that particular model, as it would.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on the event. I mean, of course, like everybody else, I thought it was brilliant. I mean, there are a lot of different figures that are floating around. I've seen figures of 500,000 persons, logged on to that event. Of course, we don't know whether it was really just 500,000, because if people are anything like me, you watched it with friends. So that would be 500,000, maybe just one person logging on a phone, but then there would have been so many other persons, who would have been watching that type of watching the show and sort of seeing the engagement and seeing the level of celebrities who were involved. I thought it was particularly interesting to see the different brands that got involved. I don't know if you all would have noticed, but you saw that it was sponsored by Ciroc,
right,
which is Diddy. That to me shows that there's definite room for involvement of Caribbean brands, in these type of online events, in these virtual events, in these concerts and so on. And great, fantastic. So we are on the exact slide. Right. So what I found was interesting from that concert was the level of mainstream attention that it brought. So it was reported by CNN, by the Shade Room, it was trending on Twitter. Many things were trending on Twitter from that concert, least of which was people shocked at Beanie Man's body, which I found was quite interesting. People were, talking about his belly and whatnot, and all these different features. Billboard magazine also featured the online concert. But what I really wanted to focus on is some of the findings, although the concert last night showed that there's vast and great interest in our industry, the music industry, which is, of course, is one sector within the carnival space. What I have found and what I've seen through all of the interviews that have been done through the YouTube series is that despite the fact that we have absolutely brilliant minds, across the sector, there is very little understanding in all of these various areas, in music, fashion, film, events, and so on, photography, that carnival as an industry is a creator of copyright, and it's a creator of intellectual property, which we can leverage for long-term generational wealth within our country. Next slide, please. Now, for the purposes of time, I just want to break down a couple of the findings and some of these sectors. I cannot go into all. And I'm doing this for the reason of showing you all, this is the state of where we are now. Perhaps we use this time now to regularize some of these issues, because even if all of the events go online, everything becomes augmented reality, virtual reality, the issues remain the same. So in events, we export our event products throughout the diaspora, fetes, parties, cruises. You go to wherever, Notting Hill Carnival, many carnivals, and you're going to have the same Soca Monarch, Seale pan competitions, carnival competitions, costume competitions, and so on. But what I noticed is lacking in the event sector is an understanding that the event names, these event products, are intellectual property in their own right. So event names are trademarks which need to be registered and owned, either by an individual, a company, or whatnot. And there's a great lack of understanding of the value that that brings to a company and can even bring to us as a government. So I think to make this sector a little bit clearer in this time, persons can use this time to do things like register your event names as trademarks, so that as we continue to grow, and when you put your event online, you're going to not encounter a situation of having an unregistered fet name, event name, or so on, that's now open to the whole world. I think also forming structured event committees we do have a culture of persons becoming involved in a committee for a lot of very informal reasons. They think that it's cool, it's a hobby, it's a passion, it's actually a bragging right to be part of a committee. But the unstructured event committees create a plethora of problems when people leave these committees and no one is actually sure who owns the fat name that generated that goodwill, not just throughout Trinidad, but throughout the diaspora. So these are things I think we could hone in on and structure. And then event committee contracts and contracts in general, because as some of the other speakers would have alluded to, Jules and Simon and so on, we're facing a situation with canceled events, postponed events, and so on. So I know that throughout the region, there would have been many issues in terms of, am I entitled to repay a masquerader? Do I have to give back money for a fact that has not taken place? These situations were not contemplated for any context of COVID, but they could be covered in the context of things like a force majeure clause, you know, a cancellation clause, which should be in an event contract. So I think the opportunity is now. Let us look now at structuring and tightening our arrangements. Next slide, please. In the beauty sector, beauty is instrumental to the carnival industry, and I don't think that the value of beauty is emphasized enough. So we have things like hairdressers who we use backstage at many of our events. You have the makeup artists, of course, very crucial to our artist performers, so forth in general, band launches and so on. What I notice a lot in this industry are that many of the persons in this sector, we often exploit their talent. So I've been to many band launches where hairdresser or makeup artists would have been asked to come on set to show up at a particular time, and they're there inevitably for 10 hours, 15 hours, because things run on, they're not running on time, things are slow, and they're paid the same amount that they would have been promised for 1 to 2 hours work, irrespective of the fact that you're there for 10 hours. These are things that need to be properly looked at now. And I was happy to hear that there's a lot of discussion now in terms of forming the Beauty Association of Trinidad and Tobago. What that is intended to do, from what I've been informed, is to put structures and policies in place in terms of pricing, in terms of contractual obligations, proper templates, education, and so forth. So I think, again, this space and time forms an opportunity for persons in this sector to get themselves organized, understanding the importance of paying taxes and so on. You know, that's kind of a reality that I don't think is discussed enough, that in our industry, we do have a plethora of persons that don't necessarily, you know, pay their taxes. But it's not specific to this beauty. It's fashion, it's film, it's throughout. So, you know, it's an opportunity for lobbying, structuring. Next slide, please. Carnival costume designs. Another huge area of intellectual property that is very misunderstood. And because it's misunderstood, we are losing opportunities globally. I think that I do not recall a year since I've been in practice where I have not Ash Wednesday, Thursday, Friday gotten some sort of call from a major fashion label, either based in the US, you know, some parts of the US, maybe New York, LA, where they're interested in a design that they may have seen on the road, right? Inevitably, there are issues in terms of the ownership of these designs. Who does the intellectual property vest in? Is it the band leader? Is it the designer? Who are they going to clear the title so that these designs can now be used on runways? And then usually months later, it pains me to turn on E-News and see these fabulous balls, events or whatnot. And a lot of the times I see designs that I know were produced right here or produced in Barbados Carnival and so on. But where the royalties, the so forth, the income is not coming back to us because we don't have these proper contractual arrangements in place because of the loose contracts, and nobody is going to enter into an arrangement with somebody so for them now to get third-party suits. So I think it forms, this time forms an opportunity for band leaders to sit down and put in place these proper contractual agreements, which speak to, are you commissioning the design from the person for a period of time, or is it a buyout of the underlying sketches, designs, and so forth, so that the band knows that they have this in perpetuity. These kinds of arrangements are not being done enough. Next slide, please. So let's look at the photography and videography industry, another massive aspect of the carnival ecosystem, which again, a plethora of issues in terms of ownership, copyright, and so on. Videographers and photographers are essential to the lifeblood of our events. Without these persons, we would not have content, we wouldn't have documentaries, we would not have pictures to put on all of the various websites. But the issue is a mass misunderstanding of the rights preserved for the creators of these content, creators of pictures and so forth, versus the commercial rights that this content provides. So you oftentimes, you might go to an event, you're going to see a particular photographer from a company, you know, I don't need to call names, you all know what I'm speaking about. And then you're gonna go home and see a picture of yourself online at a fete or a party and whatnot. And it creates a lot of difficulty in terms of, am I as an individual supposed to be compensated for my right being on this website? Should I be compensated for being on the front page of a glossy magazine on Ash Wednesday? So there are issues in terms of the understanding of image rights. And then there are the issues in terms of the actual photography or videography company that would have been hired by an event producer, in terms of how long do I have to exploit this footage? Can I use this footage on my website forevermore? Is it just for the purposes of this particular fact? So I think we need discussion and education and understanding of image rights as it applies to our specific context, because the reality is we don't actually in Trinidad have a freestanding image rights legislation. We operate by the Protection Against Unfair Competition Act, which says very quickly that the persons entitled to commercialization of their images are celebrities and well-known figures, not members of the public. So I think this time provides an opportunity for persons in this sector to understand licensing arrangements, understand image rights, and even for the government, for us in the intellectual property arena to reopen discussions in terms of image rights legislation, considering how important Carnival is to our particular sector. Next slide, please. Music. You know, again, I have a very short period of time left, so I just want to look very quickly. What are the main challenges in our music sector is the fact that we have a very challenging collective management organization environment. We have 3 societies who every year approach promoters, producers of events to pay licenses. That is the reality in a country of 1.3 million and so forth. So are we going to approach Carnival 2021 as though this situation is a surprise next year? And again, we have confusion in terms of who do we pay? Who are we entitled to pay this portion of rights to? I think this time provides an opportunity for this to form national discourse. I know that the Intellectual Property Office is exploring a regulatory framework for the collective management of rights and CMOs in the Caribbean. I think we need to discuss this, because the reality is that those of us who are on the ground floor, working with artists, managing music, we are facing the difficulties when international record labels, publishers say to us that we have a chaotic music management system and a chaotic manner of doing business. It does not allow for the ease of business. So I think we need to look at this at this point in time in terms of deciding where we go forward, because irrespective of events being physical or online, music still needs to be cleared. The next slide, please. Next slide. Great. So lastly, I want to say we know that we're going online, we know that we're going virtually, but the reality is, as I said to you all of these issues remain. We see that COVID has prompted innovation in delivery of goods. I saw a fantastic online concert, produced the other day by Mr. Killer and his team. I thought it was great. It was augmented reality, virtual reality. It was done on Zoom. This is where we're going. Now, in order to have some of these events, some of the issues of police clearances, EMA are going to be the same. We saw what happened in Beanie Man and Bounty, where the police showed up. So don't think that if you're going to be performing from your living room or your house, you could blast your music and not have neighbors complain. So, let's get clear. Same thing in terms of, as I said, EMA or whatnot. These things are still going to be realities. Next slide, please. What I'm seeing is definitely going to be important for us to understand in terms of these online events. Things such as user experience design, Zoom and Facebook room integration, videography, in the whole scheme of the online event production. Next slide, please. But what that means is with all of these new technologies and so forth, the intellectual property is going to be even more relevant and important and more important than it probably ever has been. Because for your online events and your online virtual tours, virtual museums, virtual whatever it is, you're still going to be using copyright that belongs to others, pictures, content, video. You're going to be using brands. I took part in a virtual tour of an event the other day where they were using simulated brands. And the brand name and the brand packaging looked very similar to a well-known brand. That is going to be a problem unless you've cleared got any consent from the brand owner and so forth. Or you're using trademarks that don't belong to other people. Entering into proper contractual agreements with the creators of this virtual reality, the software and so forth, because nobody wants to take part in an event that the event gets taken down half an hour into your lovely showcase. And I think also, lastly, to end, I think that this whole scenario informs a discussion as to maybe we should be looking at creating our own indigenous platforms. To showcase Carnival virtually, maybe one collective instead of 5 or 15 or 20 different promoters, producers, and so on, or fashion designers, maybe having some sort of hub of indigenous content, which of course would rely on many of the issues I spoke to before, copyright, using proper music. I would definitely advocate for using local music, to underscore and endorse and whatnot, provide synchronization deals for the varying artists whose music we can use and have to monetize themselves. Next slide, please. And that's basically it. Next slide. Right, so this is, where I end my presentation. I also want to let you know that coming out of this, because I see and we see the fact that everybody needs to kind of upskill and understand all of these various areas, we will be launching our online masterclasses in many areas in terms of such as trademarks, intellectual property law, event law, and so forth, to kind of help guide the monetization and the digitization of the industry moving forward. So thank you again, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you so much, Carla. Thank you for, I think, the perfect presentation to end this series of presentations. Since it deals specifically, or not specifically, since you addressed so accurately the whole issue of intellectual property, which I think is knowledge of which is lacking. You rightfully said that, again, we need to kind of improve on IP literacy and general entrepreneurial education at this time. I also take the points on, registering brands. I can definitely say that I know several Carnival practitioners, business people who operate without a registered brand or registered trademark, etc. And that wouldn't fly moving into the new normal for Carnival. I also like the idea of organization where you mentioned the stakeholders in the beauty industry coming together to kind of have a collective voice. I think that's very important for persons in non-traditional sectors. I know a few weeks ago, certain groups within the creative industry were coming together to collectively voice their concerns to the government as it pertains to their members accessing stimulus packages and social assistance, etc. And again, the whole idea of virtual reality concerts and virtual reality experiences, sorry, is very important. I've also seen, on the flip side, some concerts with, plants and the traditional decor that we in Trinidad have kind of used for the last, since probably time immemorial, as it pertains to televised broadcasts, where you have plants and vinyl backgrounds, etc. And I think we need to kind of look towards upping our game as it pertains to the type of digital products that we as an industry and as a nation present on digital and international platforms. So we have some time to field a few questions. Guys, I am going straight to gallery mode so everyone will be visible. I want to put the first question to Marcus Asht, and the question comes from Candice Guppy Sobion. And the question is this: if we are unable to gather in large numbers, how do we as a people adapt and continue to express our culture through the shaping of a new carnival? I don't know if you have something to say about that, Marcus.
If we aren't able to adapt, to gather in large numbers?
Yes, if we aren't able to gather in large numbers.
Well, I mean, that's a very good question. And in my presentation, I would have mentioned where our carnival, and in particular Steel Pan, it has been born and developed based on obstacles like these. I mean, if the African drums wasn't banned, we wouldn't have had Tambu Bambu. If the Tambu Bambu was banned, we wouldn't have had Steel Pan today. If the Steel Pan didn't decide that they were going to boycott in 1979, the rise and the evolution with the DJs on the big truck going through Carnival Monday and Tuesday wouldn't have really happened or been that effective. So all that is part of the evolution. Our first goal as stakeholders, it will remain to stay safe. We have to be guided by the government. So if the government say we cannot gather in large numbers, one, we cannot gather in large numbers. So it goes back to, I saw Carla would have mentioned the online Pantrinbago did Panorama this year, and we had a beautiful pay-per-view session where people outside of Trinidad and Tobago were able to pay and view. But let's look at the situation now in Trinidad and Tobago. Right now, as we see, we have 0 cases. That's, I'm going by what has been reported to me, 0 cases of COVID-19. And we are starting to loosen up and open up and stuff. Even if it reaches the point where we have to just do a localized, because I listened to Julius, Caesar's Army, mentioning the total local part where you get local suppliers and those things, and it made a lot of sense. Even if we do that, and even to the point of having a regional carnival, so not everybody gathering in Port of Spain, but we gather to different parts of Trinidad and Tobago and do something there in a lesser scale. I always say half a loaf is better than dying of hunger, or in this case, even COVID-19. So we have to do it in a lesser scale, and trust when I tell you all here listening that through this, something great, a new evolution is about to come out, whether it's 2021, 2022. That is just how this carnival, this culture in itself works. It is evolving, it will always be evolving, and something new is going to come out of this because of this situation. Rama, over to you.
That's a great point. I don't know if anybody wants to chime in. If not, there's a second question from Kwesi Makano that I want to direct to both Lionel and to Jules. So here's the question. why has there never been an effort to industrialize mass making rather than continuously exporting the production to China, for example? Lionel and then Jules.
Okay, I want to start off by saying it's a bit of a misconception that the production of the mass is totally Chinese or outsourced. It's a handful of bands that use this avenue, because I myself am a wholesale producer of costumes, and I do make costumes for larger bands and other bands in San Fernando as well. What happened was there are some pieces and some materials, a lot of materials that we do get from China. So when you go to suppliers for that, they offer you this production, but it's not a total production. It may be small pieces, it may be parts of the costume. You know, it's not the whole thing. So we have local suppliers who will still do the production of the major parts of the costume, because shipping a headpiece is very hard and expensive because of the size, and it's delicate and stuff. So that's one of the main things I do. And I know for a fact that there are bathing suit and board short companies and certain seamstresses and tailors that do make stuff. So it's not a total outsourcing, but there are stuff that we have to save money by doing it. So it's an ethical choice, and it's also a financial choice to source stuff from China, but it's not 100%. It's probably probably one person started the conversation and made it sound as though all the big bands are doing it, but it's not true. So there are many wholesale producers of all the parts of the costumes right here in Trinidad and Tobago. So that's the way I would address that. So it's a major misconception to start with. So
thanks, Lionel. Jules, I just want to redirect the question a little bit. How feasible do you think it is to have 100% Jules production of carnival costumes for the bands that you associate with, the tribes, the rogues, etc.? How realistic and feasible is it to have 100% production locally?
Well, I'm not really that deep into the production process, because if I had to say that the collaboration between Caesar's Army and Tribe, I would say that Tribe was more the connoisseurs of the production. But from my knowledge, I guess what I am understanding here is that certain elements it's better to get from abroad. But for me, I mean, if we are the be-all and end-all of Carnival, I think it comes from a lack of not being able to teach the next generation that is coming up to getting into the Carnival and understanding what is required in terms of production and fashion, style, etc., the various elements of it. It may not be 100% feasible, given, I guess, how long this has been going on in terms of the importation of stuff like that. But I think that this time now should evoke that sort of thought process where maybe it is that we start to look into it and analyze it. And even if we have to start building from now, I mean, now is the time to plan.
Right. Okay. Thanks for that answer. Thanks for that answer, Jules. I have a question here from Dr. Rudolph Otley. If we are having Carnival in 2021, how do we prepare and execute it? If we know Carnival, how do we utilize the downtime? And how are we going to use the Carnival data to shape future Carnivals? It's a kind of broad question. I'm hoping that Simon would want to take a stab at it. I know you've kind of covered some of the, you've responded to some of these questions in your own presentation, but I'm wondering if you could go a bit further to kind of respond.
I think Ryan is far more capable at answering this question than I am, to be quite honest.
Ryan, can I redirect to you? You good, Simon?
Yeah, I'm good. Let Ryan take it.
Okay, Ryan, I just want to redirect the question to you. If we're having Carnival in 2021, how do we prepare and execute it? If we know Carnival, how do we utilize the downtime? And how are we going to use the Carnival data to shape future Carnivals?
Okay, so I think I answered that a bit in the presentation. It would be hypothetical that Carnival is happening in 2021. I did propose maybe a sort of delayed Carnival. It has happened before. But remember, we're reliant on our Ministry of Health, our Ministry of National Security in terms of borders. So it would really depend on what that's going to look like. If it's not 2021, we'd have to aim for 2022. And that would be providing that a vaccine is available well in advance of that, because of course that has to be tested and be widespread and available to everyone. So that is a huge factor. Now, whether we open up the borders in a phased basis so that we have regional arrivals, but again, the problem there is we'd see that the region is starting to open up as of next month. And that can then present a new danger to the region for our regional arrivals. So there'd be a ripple effect. And that could affect everything. So it really is hypothetical as to whether we're going forward in 2021. We would expect NCC to deliberate on that over the next couple of months and make an announcement. So we would be guided by that, NCC, Ministry of Health, Ministry of National Security. In terms of what we do, well, I would have mentioned what we do in the downtime. I mean, it's, again, keeping the spirit of Carnival alive with those consumers. So those consumers would potentially be missing Carnival in other jurisdictions as well. So it's a matter of reinforcing that we are the Mecca and reinforcing what our Carnival brings to the table to those consumers. So again, it'll be sort of your lives, making sure that our influencers are fully engaged and out there, and sort of keeping that message alive until we can potentially move forward, either in later 2021 or 2022.
Okay, thanks so much, Ryan. Guys, I think we may need to just take one more and then wrap. I'll just direct this one to Simon. I know this falls within his wheelhouse. From C. Phillips, how do we convert live performance revenue statistics of from 95% of revenue to 65% of revenue for Trinidad? Sorry, let me repeat. How do you convert live performance revenue statistics from 95% of revenue to 65% of revenue, similar to international artists? Just unmute.
Right. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. No, I think it's a great question. It's one that I think there's a very simple answer to it that we all know, which is you have to produce global hits. The reality is that we have great music. There's no denying it. I've been involved in soca music for 20 years. But the fact is that very few of our songs over that span of time has managed to, I guess, in a sense, reach out to greater audiences, right? And as it is, we're going to need to be able to do that because we need people to stream our music more, purchase our music. And I mean, the harsh reality is that Caribbean people as a whole probably don't purchase as much music as they should. And it's harder for our artists to capitalize on being able to earn a revenue from, let's say, the sale of their singles and tracks, their albums, and furthermore, if it is that we still have challenges with streaming, for example, right? There has to be a way to identify that and change it. I could be wrong about this. I think it's and Carla could correct me, it's either Spotify or one of these streaming services, for example. I don't believe they operate in the Caribbean. And then that, you know, of course, affects our artists and their ability to cash in. So those are some of the challenges that our musicians, our talent, you know, face. And until we could kind of get over those humps, that's one of the ways that they're going to have to look at it. They're also going to have to look at capitalizing on their platforms. Some are already doing it. I see Nyla Blackman, others are, and they're doing, you know, a lot of online events. They're combining efforts with sponsors so that there is money coming in for what they're doing. But the fact is that there are a lot of other artists out there that may not have those names, you know, that obviously they're going to struggle, right? And they're going to have to find new ways of being innovative, maybe using, you know, platforms like TikTok and others to get, you know, their names out there and then build their audience bases, right? Like this young man who did the song Monday, I got nothing to do Tuesday, what that whole week has nothing to do, and it became viral, so to speak. And the fact is that you may not make money from the song perhaps, but when you build an audience, right, you can use that as leverage to get companies to invest in you and your brand. So there are ways to go about it. And these influencers have demonstrated, that they can then use that to capitalize on selling merchandise, etc. So there are ways to do it, but it really starts with the ability to have a song that can transcend. And that may mean, looking at the way that we approach this industry in terms of our collaborations, in terms of what we do now. And one example of that is an artist told me when I asked them, well, why don't you produce music now and take advantage? They're like, well, what's the point? We're not going to make money from it. So the way that it's being looked at, not by everyone, I want to make that clear, but by some artists, is that the only way they can make money is from live performance. And until they start realizing that there are other ways of collecting and cashing in from publishing, streaming, etc., and working hard on those platforms, they will always be stuck in that 95% bracket.
Okay, really good point, Simon. Carla, again, I know this falls within your area of expertise. I don't know if I could ask you to add some comments to what Simon just shared. And also, if possible, comment on the whole viewpoint of 50% local airplay legislation in that regard. Is that something you want to touch? Or is that a hot potato?
No, it's not a hot potato. It's just, let me deal with the first question first. I think Simon is absolutely right. He hit the nail on the head where he's saying that it's now about, innovations and collaboration. I think that this time, downtime calls for artists to really kind of think even more strategically about their collaborations, because let's face it, a lot of persons who previously would have been inaccessible are now so much more available. I mean, you can DM some of these artists, some of these celebrities, and they're responding, on Instagram and whatnot, because guess what? They're home just like you too. So now I think it's the opportunity to look at these sort of global giants and form, alliances, maybe hone your songwriting skills a little bit better. I mean, if we look at Billboard magazine, for example, I saw that the front cover of Billboard magazine is one of the top African artists, Davido and some of these guys. These guys have millions of followers. So imagine if we leverage that. I mean, obviously, we don't need to go into detail. We know that Soca, Afrobeats, and so forth all come from the same cultural heritage. Let's look at collaborations with this part of the world and other parts of the world with chutney, soca, and whatnot. Look at collaborations with these Indian artists and really sort of move strategically in that way, because that's how I think it's going to be easier for us to rise collectively. I also think that collaborations with Caribbean artists, across genres is important as well, not just soca to soca, but maybe soca to jazz or whatnot, because we really do need to think of ourselves more as a collective, a stronger Caribbean community, because when we add up our numbers, as opposed to Trinidad with 1.3 and Barbados with whatever, it makes it a bit better of an investment opportunity for those looking outside when these hits are created. In terms of the local content, that is a challenging discussion, only because there have been so many incarnations of these groups, associations and whatnot, where we lobby for local content. I think the rationale for local content is clear. It's clearer now than ever that we need to reinvest in our own, in our home, in our local products and so forth. Whether it's 50, I don't know whether I'm strongly about 50 versus 60-40 or 70-30. What I am pro is that we need to understand and respect the fact that content, irrespective of whether it's music, film, TV, needs to be played so that we have a better understanding of our culture and the importance of it. Because the reality is, we hear all the radio station owners tell us all the time, well, You know, they have to play what's popular, or they have to play, you know, because they're a commercial entity. But I believe that they inform what becomes popular. They are the ones that have a huge impact on what people think is relevant. You know, so to shorten the answer, yes, I'm very pro local content, and I would love all of these draft papers and green papers to actually go somewhere and be implemented.
Okay, thanks so much, Carla. Okay, so guys, I think we've come to the end of the presentation. I just want to recap some of the key points raised by the members of the panel. Firstly, we spoke about social assistance. I think Marcus and Lionel hinted to the need for it. I think Marcus was also sharing that Pantrinbago is launching an initiative this Friday to provide assistance to their members. I think that will be very important moving forward. Jules, Simon, Carla, several members of the panel also spoke about innovation and transformation, which I think again is key moving forward. These are this is, you know, the whole concept of transformation and innovation is what will separate us from you know, the other festivals and also from other sectors that may not be able to capitalize as easily on the digital platforms and these other types of platforms that are available to creators of you know, intellectual property and carnival products. The next key point was the whole issue of local manufacturing. You know, Jules mentioned it first, Lionel also spoke on it, the whole idea of moving operations to purely domestic, a purely domestic approach to manufacturing of you know, carnival costumes and general carnival products. I think it's a, you know, it's a great opportunity for us to exploit in light of COVID and border restrictions, etc. Another important point was the whole idea of training, technological training, training in education and intellectual property, you know, just entrepreneurial literacy. Training is a key point and is a very important, something very important that we need to look at in the downtime that we have right now while we try to figure out and negotiate the future of COVID. You know, as we all know, we are guided by, you know, the Ministry of Health, the experts, and by the government as to how we move forward. And it's important that, or it's incumbent on us to kind of look at this time to develop skills, which is something I advise my students to do as well. Someone had mentioned it briefly, they just paid a minor lip service to it, but the whole idea of community festivals is, I think it was may have been Ryan, the whole idea of community festivals and, you know, really looking at establishing the various communities as hubs of carnival, as opposed to the concentration in Port of Spain that usually happens. Of course, there are community carnivals during the carnival season every year, but we may need to focus on them a bit more, or it may be wise to focus on them a bit more in light of you know, physical and social distancing guidelines, etc. And last but not least, the whole idea of government, legislation, and policy. I think the role of government cannot be understated. I do also want to state that you know, members of the NCC were unavailable today. We are hoping to have them on a future panel, but they were unavailable today. We did reach out to them. But it's important that we really look at you know, how the government can play a role in designing legislation with the assistance of stakeholders and really fostering the whole idea of collaboration between, again, the public and private sectors and the non-governmental sectors to see how best we could, again, negotiate the future of the carnival. As Marcus so rightly said, the history of the evolution of the festival is littered with instances of tribulation, and at every turn, again, the festival transformed. You know, as early as the banning of the drum in 1884 after the Hussein riots, you know, really led to the evolution and the development of the steel pan, you know, after the tambu bambo became the main instrument, etc. And again, even with the proliferation and the development of music technology, in so far as the development of sound systems and the ability to have a portable sound system on a truck, etc. This helped revolutionize the festival and allow us to have large bands, you know, spanning tens of thousands of people, etc. So I want to thank all the panelists for being part of the webinar. I want to hand over to my colleague, Chrison, at this point to just give a vote of thanks. Unmute, Chrison. Chrison, you need to unmute. Yeah.
You hearing me now?
Yes, we are.
Lovely. We've had quite the morning, full of robust discussion and fodder for future thoughts. I want to give special thanks to the Carnival practitioners that generously gave up their time, expertise, and experiences. Marcus, Devon, Lionel, Simon, Jules, Ryan, and of course, Carla. Your sharing has had just the impact that we had hoped for. We at the Academy feel fortunate to count you amongst our friends and look forward to seeing your respective careers continue to blossom. Thank you to Lamar for flying the Master of Arts and Carnival Studies flag high for your professional management of this event. Thank you to the larger university community, the postgraduate office, corporate communications, and the Learning Center in particular for your technical support. Thanks to our president and board for giving their blessings to proceed. The penultimate thanks goes to our distinguished leader, Professor Hollis Liverpool, for continuing to guide the Academy and particularly our Master of Arts in Carnival Studies in a most progressive manner. We of course look forward to having some of you viewing today join our ranks in the coming academic year. Feel free to contact us directly for more information about this very important program by sending an email to theacademy@utt.edu.tt or finding us on Facebook or visiting the University of Trinidad and Tobago's website. Finally, and dare I say most importantly, thanks to you viewers for your presence, for your lively chats, for those questions which we were able to field, and for your love and respect for the Trinidad and Tobago Carnival. We expect to continue these conversations and sincerely want to make sure you are well informed. As Lamar mentioned a little while ago, we are looking towards hopefully hosting a follow-up to this conversation with some of our foremost policy makers. And hopefully that'll happen in the next couple of weeks. So definitely make contact with us at the Academy so that you can keep in touch with what's happening. Be sure to follow the Academy of Arts Letters Facebook page to keep abreast. Again, thank you for your participation. Eid Mubarak. Blessings flow. Thank you.